She was meant to be my slave. Want to marry her now?" The prince declared. A poor seamstress is dragged before the emperor's court, accused of stealing silk she never touched. The crowd jeers. The gavel falls, her freedom ripped away in chains, but then silence. A prince rises, voice shaking the walls. "She was meant to be my slave. Want to marry her now?" The court gasps. Is it madness or destiny? Thrown into the scullery, mocked and beaten, she clings to faith. Yet, in hidden gardens, forbidden vows are whispered. But shadows stalk her every step. A jealous noble spreads rumors of witchcraft. A stolen ring becomes the weapon that could burn her alive. The firewood is stacked. The crowd gathers. Her fate rests on a secret buried in bloodlines long forgotten. Will love defy an empire, or will the flames consume them both? Comment below and tell me where in the world you're joining from. And if this story made you pause for a moment, hit that subscribe button for more. The morning sun filtered through the high windows of the Royal Palace Workshop in Vienna, casting long rays across the busy room filled with seamstresses, weavers, and dyers. The steady rhythm of needles piercing fabric mixed with the soft murmur of feminine voices and the occasional snap of thread being cut. Dozens of beeswax candles flickered in their brass holders, helping illuminate the detailed work in shadowy corners. Elizabeth Bauer sat on a wooden stool near one of the windows, her nimble fingers working steadily at the hem of an elaborate court gown. The silk was the color of fresh cream, adorned with delicate pearl beading that caught the light. A quiet melody escaped her lips as she worked. An old hymn her mother had taught her in childhood, her own simple brown wool dress and white linen cap marked her as one of the common workers. But the quality of her stitching had earned her a place among the palace seamstresses despite her humble origins. The other women largely ignored her, though some cast envious glances at the precise, even nature of her work. The peaceful industry of the morning shattered as Lady Margarethe von Reinhardt swept into the workshop, her green silk skirts rustling dramatically. Her sharp eyes fixed immediately on Elizabeth, narrowing with barely concealed malice. "What have we here?" Lady Margarethe's voice rang out, silencing all conversation. She strode toward Elizabeth's workstation, her heels clicking against the wooden floor. "I've just been informed that a bolt of imported Chinese silk has gone missing from the palace stores." Elizabeth's hands stilled on her work as she looked up, confusion clear in her gentle features. "Missing, my lady? I know nothing of any missing silk." "Search her basket," Lady Margarethe commanded the palace guards who had followed her into the workshop. "Such valuable fabric would fetch a fine price in the market, would it not, little seamstress?" Elizabeth's heart began to pound as the guards appended her simple woven basket. Among her own modest sewing supplies tumbled a length of brilliant azure silk, its surface shimmering like water in the candlelight. Her eyes widened in shock. "That is not mine," Elizabeth protested, rising to her feet. "I have never seen that silk before this moment. Someone must have silence." Lady Margarethe's voice cracked like a whip. "How dare you speak such lies in the palace itself? Guards, seize this thief. She shall answer for this crime before the royal court." Elizabeth's protests went unheeded as the guards grabbed her arms, their grip bruising through her wool sleeves. The other seamstresses turned away, unwilling to meet her desperate gaze or speak in her defense. Only Lady Margarethe's satisfied smile followed her as she was dragged from the workshop. The afternoon found Elizabeth trembling before the assembled royal court. The grand hall stretched vast around her, its marble floors and gilded walls making her feel smaller than ever. Nobles in their fine silks and velvets lined the walls, watching her disgrace with idle curiosity. The emperor's chancellor, a thin man with steel-gray hair, read the charges in a monotone voice that echoed off the vaulted ceiling. "Elizabeth Bauer, You stand accused of theft from the royal household. The evidence of your crime was found in your very possession. Have you anything to say in your defense?" "Please, Your Honor." Elizabeth's voice shook but remained clear. "Am innocent of this crime. I have always served honestly and well. Someone must have placed that silk in my basket to shame me." Derisive laughter rippled through the assembled nobles. Lady Margarethy's voice carried above the rest, dripping with false concern. "How convenient to blame others for your own misdeeds. But what can one expect from common blood?" The Chancellor raised his hand for silence. "The word of a peasant cannot stand against the evidence of our own eyes. Elizabeth Bower, you are hereby stripped of all rights and privileges. You shall be bound into palace servitude for the remainder of your natural life, that you might repay some small measure of your debt to the crown." The pronouncement fell like a physical blow. Elizabeth's knees gave way beneath her, and she collapsed to the marble floor as whispers of approval circulated among the nobility. Her vision blurred with tears as the life she had known, her modest dreams, her hard-won position, her very freedom, crumbled to dust around her. The grand sentencing chamber echoed with the rustle of silk gowns and whispered conversations. Tall windows cast long shadows across the marble floor where Elizabeth knelt, her plain wool dress a stark contrast to the sea of gleaming velvets and jewels surrounding her. The iron chains binding her wrists clinked softly as she trembled. Emperor Leopold sat straight-backed on his gilded throne, his stern face carved like granite beneath his powdered wig. To his right, Lady Margarethy von Reinhardt stood with her, chin lifted high, a smile of cruel satisfaction playing at the corners of her painted lips. "Elizabeth Bower," the Emperor's voice rang out, silencing the murmurs of the assembled court. "You have been found guilty of theft from the royal workshops. Such brazen disrespect cannot go unpunished. You shall be stripped of all rights and bound into palace servitude for the remainder of your natural life." Tears spilled down Elizabeth's cheeks, but she held her head high. "Your Majesty, I swear on my immortal soul, I am innocent." Silence. The Emperor's hand struck the arm of his throne. "The evidence speaks clearly enough. Father, wait." The unexpected voice cut through the tension like a sword. Prince Matthias stepped forward from where he had been standing in silence among the courtiers. His blue eyes blazed with determination as he moved to stand beside Elizabeth. "She was meant to be my slave," he declared, his clear voice carrying to every corner of the chamber. "I want to marry her now." Gasps erupted throughout the room. Several ladies pressed their fans to their lips, while others tittered nervously, assuming this must be some elaborate jest. The whispers grew to a steady hum of shocked conversation. "Matthias," the Emperor's face flushed dark with anger, "have you taken leave of your senses?" Lady Margarethy's triumphant smile had vanished, replaced by an expression of pure horror. "Your Majesty, surely the prince cannot be serious. She is nothing but a common thief." "I am entirely serious," Matthias replied, his gaze never leaving his father's face. "I have watched her work these past months. She carries herself with more grace and dignity than many who were born to titles. I would rather have her honest heart than all the noble blood in Europe." The Emperor rose from his throne, his voice thundering through the chamber. "This is reckless folly. You forget yourself and your duty to this family. You cannot marry a common criminal." "Then test her worth," Matthias challenged. "Give her a chance to prove herself." A long moment of tense silence followed as father and son locked eyes in an unspoken battle of wills. Finally, the Emperor spoke, each word measured and cold. "Very well. The sentence shall stand unless the girl can prove herself noble in either spirit or blood. Until then, she remains a slave of this palace." He waved his hand in dismissal. "Take her away." Two guards stepped forward to grasp Elizabeth's arms. As they led her toward the servants' wing, she caught a glimpse of Prince Matthias's face. His expression held such tender concern that her heart skipped a beat. Despite her circumstances, through winding corridors and narrow stairs, the guards brought her to a small chamber high in the servants' quarter. They removed her chains, but locked the heavy door behind them. Elizabeth rushed to the window, pressing her hands against the iron bars. The moon had risen, casting silver light across the palace courtyard below. Movement caught her eye, and her breath caught in her throat. There, in the shadows of the garden, stood Prince Matthias. As if sensing her gaze, he looked up toward her window. Slowly, deliberately, he placed his hand over his heart and bowed deeply. Elizabeth's fingers tightened on the bars as she watched him. In that silent gesture, she read a promise that brought fresh tears to her eyes, not of despair this time, but of hope. Whatever trials lay ahead, she was not alone. The first rays of dawn crept through the narrow windows of the palace scullery, casting weak light on Elizabeth's raw, reddened hands as she scrubbed linens in a wooden tub. Around her, kitchen maids worked with drooping shoulders, their faces drawn with exhaustion from rising before sunrise. The harsh lye soap stung Elizabeth's skin, but she kept working, determined to maintain her dignity. Well, if it isn't the prince's fancy, sneered Mistress Helga, the broad-shouldered overseer, her keys jangling at her waist as she strutted past. Think yourself above honest work, do you? Just because His Highness took pity on you. Elizabeth's cheeks burned, but she kept her eyes down, focusing on the sodden sheets before her. The other maids tittered, some shooting her envious glances, while others openly glared. I heard she bewitched him, whispered one maid to another, loud enough for Elizabeth to hear. No proper prince would look twice at a thieving seamstress. Hush now, another replied. They say she's actually a witch who cast a spell on him during the trial. The morning dragged on endlessly. Elizabeth's back ached as she hauled heavy loads of firewood from the courtyard to feed the kitchen hearths. The rough logs scraped her arms, leaving splinters in her skin. When that task was done, she was set to scrubbing the vast stone floors of the servants' corridors, the coarse brush wearing away at her palms until they felt raw and tender by midday. Her shoulders trembled with exhaustion as she wrung out Noble's delicate garments, careful not to tear the fine fabrics despite her fatigue. One silk chemise slipped from her grip, and Mistress Helga's sharp voice cut through the air like a whip. Clumsy girl, you'll pay for any damage from your meals. When the evening bells finally tolled for vespers, Elizabeth gratefully made her way to the palace chapel. The cool, quiet sanctuary offered blessed relief from the day's torments. She slipped into an empty back pew, bowing her head in prayer. The familiar Latin chants washed over her like balm. Suddenly, a warm presence settled beside her. Elizabeth's heart quickened as she recognized Prince Matthias, who had somehow managed to enter unnoticed through a side door. He kept his eyes forward, but his whispered words reached her ears alone. "Keep faith, dear heart," he murmured. "There is dignity in honest work, no matter how others mock. Your spirit shines brighter than any jeweled crown." "Your Highness is too kind," she whispered back, her voice trembling. "But I fear I cannot endure their cruelty much longer." "You are stronger than you know," he replied softly, "and far worthier than those who torment you." In the days that followed, they began meeting in secret corners of the vast palace gardens. Behind tall hedges or in the shade of ancient oak trees, they would share precious moments together. Matthias marveled at her quick mind and the grace with which she bore her hardships. "Tell me more about the books you've read," he would say, genuinely interested in her thoughts on philosophy and poetry. "Your insights show such wisdom and understanding." "You give me too much credit, Your Highness," Elizabeth would reply, though her heart soared at his praise. "I give you exactly what you deserve," he would insist, his eyes shining with admiration. Your courage in facing each day with dignity moves me deeply." As the sun set on another grueling day of labor, Elizabeth finally stumbled into her tiny chamber in the servants' wing. Her muscles screamed in protest as she collapsed onto her thin straw mattress. The rough blanket scratched against her skin, but she hardly noticed. Reaching beneath her pillow, she drew out a small posy of violets that had appeared mysteriously on her windowsill that morning. She knew who had left them there. Pressing the delicate blooms to her lips, she breathed in their sweet fragrance and whispered a prayer. "Dear Lord, grant me strength to endure these trials. Let me prove worthy of such kindness, such faith in my character, and protect him who risks so much to show me gentleness." The violet's perfume followed her into exhausted sleep, a reminder that even in her darkest moments, she was not truly alone. Morning dew sparkled like tiny diamonds on the neatly trimmed hedges of the palace garden courtyard. Elizabeth moved quietly between the herb beds, her worn basket hanging from one arm as she gathered fresh rosemary in time for the kitchen. The early spring air carried the sweet scent of flowering apple trees, making her pause to breathe deeply. "Good morrow, fairest heart," came a soft voice from behind the boxwood hedge. Elizabeth's heart leaped as Prince Matthias stepped into view, his elegant blue coat somewhat rumpled from hiding behind the greenery. He wore a gentle smile that made her chest tighten with emotion. "Your Highness," she whispered, dropping into a curtsy, "we mustn't be seen." "The gardeners won't arrive for another hour," he assured her, moving closer. "I've watched their schedules carefully." His eyes held such warmth that Elizabeth felt her cheeks flush. They settled onto a stone bench, partially hidden by climbing roses. The morning air was cool, but Elizabeth barely noticed, warmed by his presence beside her. "Sometimes I feel like a ghost in my own home," Matthias confessed, his voice low. "My brother Franz is the heir, the golden son. He leads armies, negotiates treaties, while I, double quotes, he sighed. I attend balls and smile prettily for visiting dignitaries." Elizabeth's heart ached for the pain in his voice. "Yet you have such gifts, my prince, your kindness, your wisdom." "Please," he interrupted gently, "when we're alone, just Matthias." She smiled, daring to touch his hand. "Matthias, I see how the servants speak of your fairness, how the children light up when you visit the village school. And you?" he asked softly. "What does your heart yearn for?" Elizabeth was quiet for a moment, thinking. "A simple life of dignity," she finally answered. "Not riches or titles, but to work with pride, to worship freely, to ... She hesitated, then finished in a whisper, "to love without shame." Matthias squeezed her hand. The scripture says, "Love bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things." 1 Corinthians. Elizabeth smiled. "My mother taught me another. Be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid. Do not be discouraged, for the Lord your God will be with you wherever you go." Joshua 1 verse 9. Matthias nodded. "It brings me comfort when court life feels overwhelming." Over the next several days, their meetings became more frequent, though always carefully hidden. Elizabeth would find small notes tucked into the linens. She collected bits of poetry, scripture verses, words of devotion. Once, while passing in a corridor, their hands brushed briefly, sending sparks through her entire body. One evening, a sunset painted the chapel windows in gold and crimson. Matthias asked Elizabeth to meet him there. She slipped in through the servant's entrance to find him waiting in the shadows near the altar. "My beloved," he whispered, taking both her hands in his. "I can wait no longer to speak what's in my heart." Elizabeth's breath caught as he drew something from his coat, a ring of delicate gold, set with a deep blue sapphire that seemed to glow in the candlelight. "This was my mother's," he said softly. She told me to give it only to the woman who captured my heart completely. His eyes shone with emotion. That woman is you, Elizabeth. Tears welled in her eyes as he slid the ring onto her finger. Together, they knelt before the altar, hands clasped tightly. I pledge myself to you, Matthias vowed, before God and all the angels as witness. Whatever comes, my heart is yours alone. And I pledge myself to you, Elizabeth whispered back, her voice trembling with joy. My love, my life, my all. Later. That night, Elizabeth crept back into the servants' dormitory, her heart soaring despite her exhaustion. She carefully removed the sapphire ring and tucked it into a small pocket she'd sewn inside her shift, close to her heart. For the first time since her arrest, real hope bloomed in her chest, in the shadows of the dormitory hallway, unknown to Elizabeth. A figure stood perfectly still. Watching her return with calculating eyes, candlelight flickered across the great hall as nobles feasted at the evening banquet. Count von Reinhardt swirled the wine in his crystal goblet, his sharp eyes fixed on Prince Matthias at the high table. The prince seemed distracted, barely touching his roasted pheasant. When Matthias rose early from his seat and made his excuses, to the Emperor Reinhardt's suspicions deepened. With practiced stealth, the Count followed at a distance as Matthias strode through the torch-lit corridors. Near the servants' wing, Reinhardt pressed himself into an alcove's shadows. His lips curled into a sneer as he watched Matthias stop beside a humble figure in a gray dress, Elizabeth Bauer, the disgraced seamstress. My heart aches when we are apart, Matthias whispered, taking her hand. Elizabeth's face glowed with tender affection as she gazed up at him. The sight made bile rise in Reinhardt's throat. A common servant daring to receive a prince's devotion. It was an abomination against natural order. He watched them part reluctantly, then slipped away. To find his cousin, Lady Margaretti was exactly where he expected, holding court among chattering noblewomen in the withdrawing room. When he caught her eye and beckoned, she excused herself with practiced grace. "Dearest cousin," Reinhardt said once they were alone in his study, "I have discovered something most disturbing about our prince's recent behavior." He poured them both glasses of French brandy as he shared what he had witnessed. Margarethi's face twisted with rage. That little witch. I knew there was something unnatural about her hold over him. No mere servant girl could turn a prince's head so completely. Indeed, Reinhardt's voice dropped lower. Perhaps it is time we helped others see the truth of her dark arts. Over the next week, their whispered campaigns spread through the palace like poison. At cards, Reinhardt mentioned how Elizabeth muttered strange words in the chapel. During hunts, he wondered aloud how a common seamstress could so thoroughly enchant a prince. Margarethi told her friends how she had seen Elizabeth gathering suspicious herbs by moonlight. "Mark my words," Reinhardt declared to a group of concerned nobles. "She has bewitched our beloved prince with foul sorcery." How else could such an unnatural attachment form? The rumors grew darker with each telling. Servants crossed themselves when Elizabeth passed. Ladies drew back their skirts. Even the palace priests began watching her with wary eyes. But Reinhardt needed proof to spring his trap. He summoned a desperate young servant boy to his chambers, pressing a heavy purse of gold into his hands. "Search the witch's belongings," he ordered. "Find evidence of her dark deeds." 2 days later, the boy returned trembling, clutching something wrapped in cloth. Reinhardt's eyes gleamed as he unwrapped the sapphire ring, a royal heirloom. He recognized instantly. "Well done," he purred, adding another purse of gold. "Now run, tell the guards you've discovered a thief with stolen royal jewels." That very night, as Elizabeth sorted linens in the laundry by candlelight, heavy boots echoed on the stone floor. She looked up to find herself surrounded by palace guards, their faces grim. "Elizabeth Bauer," their captain declared, "you are charged with theft of royal property and the practice of witchcraft against His Highness Prince Matthias. "No!" Elizabeth cried, as rough hands seized her arms. "I am innocent of these lies." But her protests fell on deaf ears as they dragged her through the torchlit corridors. Servants peeked out doorways, making signs against evil. Some spat at her feet. The guards marched her down winding stone stairs into the dank castle dungeons. They threw her into a cold cell, the iron door clanging shut with terrible finality. The sound of their retreating footsteps faded, leaving her alone in the pressing darkness. Elizabeth sank to her knees on the damp stone floor, her wrists aching from the heavy shackles. Tears rolled down her cheeks as she whispered the only name that gave her hope. Matthias... She could not know that even then, word of her arrest was reaching the prince, and he was already racing through the palace to come to her aid. Dawn's pale light crept across Vienna's great square as people gathered in clusters, their breath visible. In the chilly morning air, market stalls stood empty, their usual bustle replaced by the eager press of Bode peasants in rough wool, merchants in sturdy cloth, nobles in fine silk and velvet. They whispered and pointed at the wooden platform erected in the square's center, where the emperor's justice would soon be served. "They say she bewitched the prince himself," a merchant's wife whispered, clutching her shawl. "Quiet now," her husband warned. "Here they come." The crowd parted as palace guards marched forward, their boots echoing against the cobblestones. Between them walked Elizabeth Bauer, her wrists bound in iron chains that clinked with each step. Her simple dress was wrinkled from the dungeon, but she held her head high, though her face was pale as milk. The guards roughly pushed her onto the platform where three stern-faced judges sat at a wooden table. Count von Reinhardt stepped forward, his fine burgundy coat catching the morning light. His voice carried across the square as he addressed the judges. "Honorable sirs, I present evidence of this servant's wickedness." He held up the sapphire ring, its blue stone gleaming. This royal heirloom was found among her possessions, stolen from the palace treasury through dark arts. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Elizabeth's voice rang out clear and steady. "I did not steal it. It was freely given." Silence. The head judge struck his gavel. "You will speak when questioned, girl." The count continued, his words dripping with venom. Not content with mere theft, she used witchcraft to enchant Prince Matthias, turning his head with spells and potions. How else could a common servant girl catch a prince's eye? The crowd gasped and shifted. Some made signs against evil, while others shouted accusations. Elizabeth stood straight-backed, despite the jeers, her lips moving in silent prayer. Suddenly, a commotion erupted at the square's edge. "Stop!" A commanding voice cut through the noise. The crowd turned as Prince Matthias pushed through, his riding clothes dusty from haste. He bounded onto the platform, his blue eyes blazing with determination. "My lords, you must hear the truth," Matthias declared, facing the judges. "That ring was my gift to Elizabeth, freely given in love. There is no witchcraft here, only the pure affection between two hearts." The square fell silent as death. Count von Reinhardt's face twisted in fury, while the judges exchanged alarmed glances. A horse's hooves clattered on stone as the emperor himself arrived, his face dark with anger. "My son," Leopold's voice was cold as winter frost, "you dishonor yourself and your crown with such foolishness." He gestured to his guards. "Take the prince to his chambers. He is confined there until he remembers his duty." "Father, no." Matthias struggled as guards seized his arms. "Elizabeth is innocent. You cannot." "Enough." The emperor's voice thundered across the square. "The evidence of wickedness is clear. Elizabeth Bauer, you are sentenced to death by fire for witchcraft and theft." The sentence will be carried out in 3 days' time. Elizabeth swayed, but did not fall. The crowd erupted in shouts, some cheering, others weeping. As guards led her from the platform, she caught a last glimpse of Matthias being dragged away. Still fighting to reach her back in the dank confines of her dungeon cell, Elizabeth sank to her knees on the cold stone floor. Torchlight from the corridor cast wavering shadows through the iron bars. She clasped her hands together, closing her eyes as tears slipped down her cheeks. "Dear Lord," she whispered, her voice trembling but determined, "grant me strength to face what comes. Let your light shine even in this darkness." The flames of the torches flickered, sending shadows dancing across the walls of her prison as Elizabeth continued her quiet prayers in the gloom. The hidden truth, the dungeon's damp chill seeped through stone walls as Elizabeth huddled on her thin straw pallet, moonlight filtering through the barred window high above. Her fingers traced the rough-hewn cross she had scratched into the wall, finding comfort in prayer despite her dire circumstances. The night before her execution stretched endless before her. A whisper of movement caught her attention. Metal hinges creaked softly as a cloaked figure slipped through the heavy wooden door, moving with surprising agility despite advanced years. The strangers who'd fell back, revealing the weathered face of Sir Ulrich von Kessler, his white hair gleaming in the torchlight. "My lady," he whispered, dropping to one knee before her. "At last, I have found you." Elizabeth drew back, confusion clouding her features. "Sir, you mistake me. I am but a common seamstress." "No, child." Ulrich's eyes shone with emotion. "You are the granddaughter of Baron Heinrich von Falkenstein, and I have carried the proof of your birthright these 20 years. Her heart quickened. "But my father was a merchant. Your father was Friedrich von Falkenstein." The Baron's only son, Ulrich, interrupted gently. "When false charges of treason destroyed your grandfather's name, your father fled with your mother, taking a common name to protect you." From beneath his cloak, Ulrich withdrew a leather pouch. His gnarled hands trembled as he produced yellowed letters bearing noble seals, along with a small portrait miniature. Elizabeth gasped. The woman in the painting wore her own face, though dressed in fine silks. "Your grandmother," Ulrich explained. "The resemblance is unmistakable." Before Elizabeth could respond, the door creaked again. Her heart leaped as Prince Matthias stepped into the cell, having bribed the guard for these precious moments. His eyes were red-rimmed from sleepless nights. "My love," he breathed, rushing to gather her in his arms. Then he noticed Ulrich and stiffened. "Peace, Your Highness," the old knight said. "I bring salvation for you both." As Ulrich explained Elizabeth's true heritage, tears spilled down Matthias's cheeks. He clutched the documents, hands shaking. "These seals, they are genuine. Father cannot deny such proof." Hope blazed in his eyes. "My darling, you are saved." "We must act quickly," Ulrich cautioned. "I will take these to the Emperor at first light. The execution cannot proceed once your noble blood is proven." Elizabeth touched the miniature of her grandmother with trembling fingers. "All these years, I never knew. My father died when I was so young, he never spoke of his past." "He sought to protect you," Ulrich said gently. "But now the truth must be revealed. To protect your life." The three knelt together on the cold stone floor, joining hands in prayer. Elizabeth's soft voice led them in the Lord's Prayer, her faith steady despite all she had endured. Matthias's grip tightened on her fingers as they whispered Amen. Dawn's first pale light began to creep through the high window. Ulrich gathered the precious documents, securing them in his pouch. "I must go now to catch the Emperor before morning court." As the old knight moved to leave, Elizabeth called out softly, "Sir Ulrich, thank you for keeping faith all these years." He bowed deeply. "It has been my sacred honor, my lady." When the door closed behind him, Matthias gathered Elizabeth close. "If these are our final moments together," he whispered, "know that my heart is yours for eternity." "God's will be done," Elizabeth murmured, though tears slipped down her cheeks. "Whatever comes, your love has given me strength I never knew I possessed." They clung together in the growing light, whispering prayers and tender words, knowing that somewhere above them, Sir Ulrich raced against time to save not only Elizabeth's life, but their chance at lasting happiness. The proof of her nobility might have come at the final hour, but perhaps, by God's grace, it was not too late. The hidden truth dawn broke cold and gray over Vienna's central square. A chill wind whipped through the gathering crowd, making the carefully stacked wood of the execution pyre creak ominously. Market women clutched their shawls tighter, and nobles huddled beneath fur-lined cloaks as they pressed forward for a better view. The air held the sharp scent of fresh pine branches and pitch, its materials chosen to ensure a swift and hot flame. Guards led Elizabeth from the dungeon, her slender form clothed only in a thin white shift that offered little protection against the morning air. Iron chains clinked with each step she took, but she held her head high, lips moving in silent prayer. Her face, though pale, showed neither fear nor defeat, only a quiet dignity that made some in the crowd shift uncomfortably. The emperor sat stern-faced upon a raised platform, his crimson robes a splash of rich color against the dreary morning. Lady Margarethe simpered beside Count von Reinhardt, both wearing expressions of barely concealed triumph. The gathered nobles whispered behind jeweled fans and gloved hands, eager for the spectacle to begin. Suddenly, a commotion erupted from the palace gates. Prince Matthias burst into the square, his fine clothes torn, dragging broken chains behind him. His face was flushed from exertion, evidence of his desperate escape from confinement. Guards moved to intercept him, but he dodged their grasp with surprising agility. "Father," Matthias cried out, throwing himself before the emperor's platform, "I renounce my title, my position, everything that makes me your son only. Spare her life." His voice rang across the hushed square, raw with emotion. The emperor's face darkened with fury at this public display. "You would throw away your birthright for a common thief?" he thundered. "Your Majesty?" Another voice cut through the tension. Sir Ulrich von Kessler strode forward, his aged frame straight and proud despite his years. In his hands, he clutched a leather portfolio of documents. "Before you pass judgment, there is evidence you must see." The old knight ascended the platform, offering the papers with a formal bow. The emperor's hands trembled slightly as he broke the familiar seal, that of the disgraced Baron von Falkenstein. His eyes widened as he read, color draining from his face. "These papers," the emperor began, his voice carrying across the silent square, "claim that the accused, Elizabeth Bauer, is in truth the granddaughter of Baron Friedrich von Falkenstein, through his son Johannes, who fled into exile." He paused, studying the documents more closely. They bear all proper seals and signatures. A wave of whispers swept through the crowd. Count von Reinhardt stepped forward, his carefully maintained composure cracking. "Forgeries," he declared. "Clever ones, but forgeries nonetheless. The Baron's line ended years ago. Everyone knows this. I swear upon my honor as a knight." Sir Ulrich's voice rang clear and strong. "These documents are genuine, and I am not alone in bearing witness." He gestured to the edge of the crowd, where a simply dressed priest stepped forward. "I am Father Thomas of St. Stephen's Parish," the priest announced. 23 years ago, I baptized this child, Elizabeth von Falkenstein, in secret. I recorded her true name in the church registers, though she was raised as Elizabeth Bauer to protect her from her grandfather's enemies." The crowd erupted in excited murmurs. Elizabeth stood transfixed, her eyes wide with wonder as the truth of her heritage was revealed before all. Matthias rose slowly from his knees, hope dawning on his face as he looked between Elizabeth and his father. The emperor sat rigid on his throne-like chair, pride warring with justice in his expression. The evidence seemed irrefutable, yet accepting. It meant admitting to a grave injustice against the Falkenstein family. Finally, he raised his hand for silence. "This matter requires careful consideration," he declared. "The execution will be delayed. I will convene my council immediately to examine these claims." He turned to the guards. "Return the prisoner," he hesitated, then amended. "Return Mistress Elizabeth to a proper chamber under watch. She is not to be harmed until this matter is resolved." In the emperor's private council chamber, morning light filtered through tall windows of leaded glass, casting long shadows across the polished oak table. Nobles packed the room, their faces flushed with emotion as they argued in heated whispers. The air felt thick with tension. "We cannot allow this mockery of justice," Count von Reinhardt declared, his voice sharp with disdain. "The girl is clearly a deceiver, whatever papers this aged knight produces." Countess Sophia, her gray hair elegant beneath her cap, raised her chin. "Yet Prince Matthias has shown remarkable devotion. In all my years at court, I have never seen such steadfast love." The emperor sat stern-faced at the head of the table, his fingers drumming against the carved armrest of his chair. Before him lay the scattered documents Sir Ulrich had presented, yellowed letters bearing noble seals, baptismal records, and family trees traced in careful ink. Sir Ulrich stood straight, despite his years, his weathered face dignified. "Your Majesty, I served Baron von Falkenstein faithfully for 30 years. I held his granddaughter, this same Elizabeth, in my arms at her christening. The proof lies before you." The parish priest, Father Benedict, stepped forward, his simple brown robes a stark contrast to the silks and velvets surrounding him. "I myself performed the baptism, Your Majesty." The church records are clear. Elizabeth is indeed the daughter of Johann von Falkenstein, the Baron's only son. The emperor's eyes narrowed as he lifted a particular document. "I remember Friedrich von Falkenstein well. A good man, falsely accused." His voice grew quiet. "Perhaps, ... perhaps we did him grave injustice." Lady Margarethe von Reinhardt surged forward, her face mottled with rage. "Your Majesty cannot seriously consider silence." The emperor's command cut through the chamber like a blade. He stood slowly, his shoulders straight beneath his ermine-trimmed robes. "Bring in the girl and my son." The heavy doors swung open. Elizabeth entered first, her simple white shift now dirty from the prison, but her bearing somehow regal. Behind her came Prince Matthias, still trailing broken chains from his escape. His fine clothes disheveled, but his eyes bright with hope. The emperor studied Elizabeth's face for a long moment. "I see it now. You have your grandfather's eyes." That same quiet strength. He drew a deep breath. "Let it be known that I, Leopold von Altenburg, do hereby pardon Elizabeth Bauer, nay, Elizabeth von Falkenstein, of all charges. Furthermore, I restore the Falkenstein name and titles to their rightful heir." A wave of gasps and murmurs swept through the chamber. Elizabeth's hands flew to her mouth, tears spilling down her cheeks. Before anyone could speak, Matthias strode forward. In one fluid motion, he knelt before Elizabeth, taking her trembling hands in his. "My love," he said, his voice carrying clearly through the stunned silence, "will you consent to be my wife? To stand beside me, not just in secret moments, but before God and all the world?" Count von Reinhardt's face purpled. "Your Majesty, this is madness. A restored title cannot erase enough." The emperor's voice thundered through the chamber. He rose to his full height, authority radiating from every inch of his frame. I have watched this girl face hatred with grace, bear false accusation with dignity, and meet death itself with courage. Tell me, what greater nobility exists then? Virtue itself. His stern gaze swept the room. Let any who would question this match first question their own hearts. The silence that followed was absolute. Elizabeth looked up at Matthias, her eyes shining with tears of joy. "Yes," she whispered, then louder. "Yes, with all my heart." Matthias rose, drawing her up with him, and suddenly the chamber erupted. Cheers mixed with shocked gasps, while here and there handkerchiefs appeared to dab at damp eyes. Even some who had argued most fiercely against her now found themselves moved by the pure joy radiating from the young couple. The morning sun streamed through Vienna's cathedral windows, casting rainbow patterns across the ancient stone floor. The air was sweet with the scent of lilies and roses, their white petals scattered along the center aisle. Nobles filled the front pews in their finest silks and velvets, while at the back of the vast church, kitchen maids and stable boys stood proudly in their Sunday best. Lady Catharina dabbed her eyes with a handkerchief as she watched from her place among the servants. "To think our Elizabeth will be a princess," she whispered to the cook beside her. "God truly works in mysterious ways." The cathedral bells began their joyous peal, and the great doors swung wide. There stood Elizabeth, no longer in servants. Wool, but resplendent in a gown of silver-threaded silk that caught the light with every step. Her dark hair was crowned with white roses, and her grandfather's restored seal hung from a delicate chain at her throat. As Lady Elizabeth von Falkenstein, she carried herself with quiet dignity, though her eyes shone with the same gentle warmth that had touched hearts even in the scullery. Emperor Leopold himself stood at her side. His stern face softened with something almost like tenderness. As they began their procession, Elizabeth caught sight of familiar faces among the servants, the laundresses who had shared their bread with her, the stable boy who had slipped her messages from Matthias, the cook who had offered comfort on dark days. She smiled at them, her heart full of gratitude. At the altar waited Prince Matthias, magnificent in deep blue velvet, trimmed with gold. His face lit up at the sight of his bride, and those watching saw in his expression the same devoted love that had moved him to risk everything for her. "Who gives this woman to be married?" the bishop intoned. "I do," declared the emperor, placing Elizabeth's hand in Matthias's. The gesture spoke volumes, the final seal of approval, the restoration of honor, the triumph of truth over prejudice. The couple knelt together before the altar as the bishop began the ancient rites. Matthias's voice rang clear and strong as he spoke his vows. "I, Matthias von Altenburg, take thee, Elizabeth von Falkenstein, to be my wedded wife." Elizabeth's response was softer, but no less firm, her words carrying to the farthest corners of the hushed cathedral. "I, Elizabeth von Falkenstein, take thee, Matthias von Altenburg, to be my wedded husband. ... When at last they sealed their vows with a kiss, the cathedral erupted in cheers. Even the most skeptical nobles found themselves moved by the pure joy radiating from the newly wedded pair. The celebration that followed in the palace Great Hall was unlike any in recent memory. Nobles and servants alike raised glasses to the couple's health, while musicians played from the gallery above. Elizabeth made a point of visiting the servants' table, embracing her old friends. "Your Grace," Lady Catharina curtsied, but Elizabeth pulled her into a warm embrace. "My dear friend," Elizabeth said clearly, so all could hear, "thanks to you and our fellow servants, I survived my darkest days. As princess, I promise reforms to ease the burdens of those who serve so faithfully." Matthias joined her, raising his goblet. "Let our marriage stand as proof that love and virtue matter more than pride or station. When we rule together one day, we shall remember this truth." As night fell over Vienna, the newlyweds retired to their chambers, now lit softly by beeswax candles. Matthias took Elizabeth's hand, carefully removing her ring, the same sapphire that had once nearly condemned her. "My love," he said softly, sliding it back onto her finger. "How far we have come from those first secret meetings in the garden." "God has been good to us," Elizabeth whispered, touching his cheek. "Through all our trials, he kept hope alive in our hearts. Beyond there." Windows, Vienna's bells continued their joyous song, ringing out across the city. Their pealing melody carried the message of love's triumph into the night, telling all who heard that true nobility comes not from birth alone, but from the grace of God and the virtue of the heart. Thanks for taking a moment to feel with me. If this story reminded you of what matters, hit subscribe. I'll be here tomorrow, continuing our story.